The Holy Gospel according to John, the 8th chapter. To the Jews who had believed in him, Jesus said, If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, We are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? Jesus replied, Very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. So third graders, like I said, you keep those Bibles ready. Adults, you might want to grab pew Bibles as well because we're doing some Bible hunting today. And also third graders, we talked in our group together, of course, about highlighting and writing in the Bible. So if you have a pencil or a pen or another highlighter, you may want to highlight some of what we look at today. The truth will set you free. You've likely heard or seen these words many times in your life, on posters, on signs, in books, on and on. It's actually the school motto for dozens of colleges and universities. The truth will set you free. And we just heard the origin of this phrase. It comes from chapter 8 of the Gospel of John and is spoken by Jesus. The University of Wisconsin-Madison has these words emblazoned on a plaque that's posted on the south hall of the campus. And since, again, we're encouraging our third graders and their families who just received these new Bibles to put them to use, I'd encourage you to keep those Bibles open to page 1177. Or if you're using that pew Bible, page 977, and find John chapter 8, verse 32. And as I mentioned, third graders, you could even go ahead and underline or highlight this verse. I got to tell you, it's a good one. I'll give you a second to get there. Now, John 8, verse 32 says this, Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And that sounds awesome. I mean, truth is good. Freedom is too. But wait, what is truth? Now, sure, Jesus says here that the truth will set us free, but what is it? You can turn to John 18, verse 38, so just 14 pages ahead in that Adventure Bible, page 1191. Page 989 of the Pew Bibles. When you get to John 18, verse 38, it's a scene just before Jesus' crucifixion as he stands trial before Pontius Pilate. And in the course of this exchange, in John 18, verse 38, Pontius Pilate asks Jesus, What is truth? Now, it seems perhaps a bit ironic that a politician such as Pontius Pilate was asking Jesus this question, since we currently live in a time with a sharply divided political climate, where truth seems to be a slippery concept, and lies repeated often enough are believed to be the truth. Now, out there certainly seem to be some competing visions of just what the truth is, and it's causing incredible tension and anxiety around and in us. What is truth? Is it found in the tweets and the political ads? Is it just what I read and post and share in my own social media feeds? Is the truth what is proclaimed by my chosen cable news enclave? Is it truth that's been causing family gatherings to be so uncomfortable with so many conversation topics off limits? Is the truth causing friendships to be torn apart, as so many of us have experienced? I don't think that's the truth. John 14:6 is the next place to look. Page 1186 in those Adventure Bibles, third graders. Page 984 in the Pew Bibles, everyone else. John 14, verse 6. What we read is Jesus telling us as clearly as possible, I am the way and the truth and the life. What is truth? Jesus. Now, for those of us who are followers of Jesus, or those of us who are considering being followers of Jesus, or even those of us who are uncertain about being followers of Jesus, this is really, really important. Jesus is the truth, and the truth will set us free. So, of course, the next question that comes immediately to mind is, what does it mean that Jesus is the truth? I mean, at its very heart, the idea of truth is that it is what is completely reliable and certain. The truth is what we can absolutely count on. It's the way things actually are. The truth is real. It's what we can trust. Now, remember what Jesus said in John 8, verse 32? We're going to be going back to that section. John 8, verse 32. Jesus says, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Then. Which means there's an if. You need an if before you can have a then. So again, for our third graders who just received their Bibles, here's something very important for you to know. Before John 8:32, that verse we looked at just a few minutes ago, is John 8:31, page 1176. So it's pretty incredible how the Bible works. You get verse 31, and then verse 32. It's amazing. So page 1176, page 977 on those Pew Bibles. Because John 8, verse 31 gives us our if. Jesus says, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So the truth of Jesus is somehow connected to his teaching, which is why it's so wonderful, isn't it, third graders, that we know about the teaching of Jesus, and we know how we can learn the teaching of Jesus. We can read the Bible. Specifically, you can read the four Gospels, the first four books of the New Testament. The books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are those four Gospels. They tell about the life and the teachings and the healings and the death and the resurrection of Jesus, each in their own life-giving way. And if you would like to know perhaps the very best place to learn about what Jesus teaches, I would suggest that you start with what is known as the Sermon on the Mount, which you can find in the Gospel of Matthew. So that's the first book of the New Testament. You can turn to page 1057, third graders, and see the start of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. In the Pew Bible, you find it on page 883. This is the place where there's this greatest collection of the teachings of Jesus. Because we've heard that Jesus is the truth, and we've heard Jesus say, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So we can take a look at the Sermon on the Mount to see just what Jesus teaches. So Jesus starts with what are known as the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. These statements about being blessed, or about what perhaps true happiness is. And third graders, I got to break it to you. Jesus doesn't say, blessed are the really good Fortnite players or Pokemon players. My son was bummed about that too. But Jesus does say, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. This is what Jesus teaches. Jesus also, as we go on in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches us not to murder with our actions or our words. Jesus teaches us not to respond to violence with violence. And third graders, you got to know there's a lot of really big concepts that Jesus teaches about. Things like divorce and adultery and what a big deal it is to make promises. And third graders, just know these are really big topics, and make sure you ask your caring adults your good questions. And Jesus teaches some things we probably find very hard to hear and very hard to do. You can take a look at Matthew 5, verses 43 and 44. So again, page 1057 of that Adventure Bible or 883 of the Pew Bible. Matthew 5, verses 43 and 44, where Jesus says this: "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." I gotta tell you, this one always makes me stop and think. Think about what I've been doing, what I've been saying, and how I follow or don't follow this teaching of Jesus. Maybe this knocks a little wind out of your sails too. Yet how would our lives be different? How would the life of the world around us be different if we fully held on to this teaching of Jesus to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us? How would we talk about one another? How would we talk with one another? How would we treat one another? How different would Thanksgiving dinner or our Facebook pages look? Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Love and prayer. That's what Jesus teaches. That is what following Jesus is about. And that's what freedom looks like. Jesus sets you free to love and pray. Then in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes on to teach about maybe what that looks like. It's giving to the needy, storing up treasures in heaven, not judging others, not worrying, and trusting in Jesus. And third graders, there's just one more verse that I'd like you to look up and highlight so we can be clear why we can trust Jesus. It's John 3:16 on page 1167 of those Adventure Bibles. In the Pew Bible, it's 970. And third graders, if you haven't been highlighting any verse, this might be a good place to start. This would be one to underline and highlight and circle and put stars and fireworks next to. This tells us why we can trust Jesus. John 3, verse 16 says this: "For God so loved the world that God gave God's one and only Son, that whoever believes in Jesus shall not perish, but have eternal life." And believing in Jesus simply means trusting in him. And third graders, you and the other children around you have much to teach us adults about trust. The best picture of trust I've ever seen comes from my daughter Hannah when she was just 4 years old. It was an early summer afternoon, and Hannah and my wife Karen were at a park on the swings on a beautiful sunny day. It was quiet, and they were alone on the playground as they were just swinging back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Karen noticed that Hannah had put her head back and shut her eyes as she was swinging back and forth. And in the peace of those moments, as the sun shone down and as a gentle breeze passed by, Karen said, Hannah, I think I can feel God. And Hannah said, I know, Mommy. That's why I have my eyes closed. I hope and pray that you feel God, that you trust in Jesus and his teachings, and that you know the truth. For the truth will set you free. Amen.